Today, Bitcoin trades back above $70,000 to kick off the week. Architect Partners says Robinhood's acquisition of Bitstamp is a good sign for the crypto industry and shows valuations have come back to earth. And Swan Bitcoin's chief investment officer weighs in on what to watch in the Bitcoin price ahead of the Fed. Welcome to CNBC's Crypto World. I'm Tanea McKeel. Crypto prices are in the green to kick off the week, with Bitcoin hovering above the flat line by noon Eastern at $70,000. Ether inched higher to about $3,700, and Solana added about 0.5%. Shares of the crypto firm Bakkt climbing this morning by about 7% as of noon, following a Friday report that the crypto firm is weighing a potential sale. Bloomberg is reporting that Bakkt has been working with a financial advisor to weigh a range of strategic options. In February, the company warned in an SEC filing that it might not be able to stay in business. We reached out to Bakkt about the potential sale. A spokesperson for the firm declined to comment. Okay, let's talk about the top stories. Ether just saw its best week of inflows since March. That's according to this report from CoinShares out today, which notes that inflows totaled $69 million in the first week of June and is likely in reaction to the, quote, surprise SEC decision to approve a rule change that would pave the way for spot Ether ETFs. The SEC's order on May 23rd approved applications from various exchanges to list 8 different Ether funds. The order technically does not approve the funds themselves or set a date for the ETFs to start trading in the U.S. The CoinShares report also notes that crypto investment products saw inflows totaling $2 billion in the first week of June, helping to extend a 5-week run of more than $4 billion. The asset manager says that trading volumes in ETFs rose to $12.8 billion for the week, which is up 55% from the week before. The report also notes that BlackRock's spot Bitcoin ETF now, quote, comfortably surpasses incumbent Grayscale's ETF with just under $21 billion of assets under management as of June 7th. Next, Architect Partners, a crypto M&A advisory firm, says Robinhood's acquisition of Bitstamp is a good sign for the crypto industry and shows valuations have come back to earth. According to the report, the Robinhood Bitstamp deal is an important marker of the current market. Valuations have right-sized again, and parties on both sides are beginning to bridge the recent gap in expectations. It goes on to say that the deal also shows the value of cash as a form of consideration to allow the facilitation of transactions, and that often in today's M&A market, equity is offered as a large component of consideration, creating a myriad of challenges to transaction completion. Architect also emphasized that the deal would expand Robinhood's global reach, which it says would ensure its global participation in crypto trading at a time when its crypto division is under scrutiny by the SEC. The acquisition was announced last week, about a month after Robinhood disclosed that the SEC had sent it a Wells notice and warned that upon completion of an investigation, the trading platform could be charged over its crypto operations. The report also said that Robinhood's announcement of the acquisition is, quote, not the behavior of a public company that is intimidated by the SEC. All right, turning to markets for our main story. Until recently, Bitcoin has struggled to hold on to the $70,000 level. I spoke with Raphael Zagury, Swan Bitcoin's chief investment officer, to find out what could help Bitcoin break out from there and how the Federal Reserve and U.S. presidential election factor into his crypto price outlook.
It has been an interesting year for Bitcoin. We saw, new highs at the beginning of the year, and we have not seen them since. But, we have a pretty key Fed meeting coming up this week. What are you expecting heading into the week, and how does that affect your outlook for Bitcoin?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think it's super obvious that, ultimately at some point rate cuts are probably coming. If you just look at what happened in Europe, right? Europe is heading in that direction. And I think ultimately that's what's going to happen. Timing is always uncertain, like with everything in the Fed, right? If we look back to 2020, they made a very strong stance that, if you remember, Powell was saying we're not even thinking about raising rates. And we now know where that ended, right? So I think the Fed is going to be the same thing. They're going to be saying that there are no changes in the horizon, that things are going to be stable, predictable, when we know, in fact, that that's not the case. If there's one thing we know about monetary policy, that it's not stable, it's not predictable.
What's driving things right now? I mean, how big of a catalyst would you say this upcoming Fed meeting is? what is driving things overall, given that, we had our two big catalysts for Bitcoin, the halving and the ETF launches, they're kind of behind us now.
Yeah, I think, zooming out, as you mentioned, right? I think if we look at the big events of this year, the ETF is still, I think, by far the most important one, at least in terms of what it really means for Bitcoin in the long term, right? Let's put things in perspective. If we just look at the amount of Bitcoin that was accumulated in the ETFs, right? There's more than 1 million Bitcoin that are actually being bought by BlackRock, Fidelity, the major financial firms. So think about that. If we went a year ago and I told you we're going to have an ETF, not only we're going to have an ETF, but 5 months after the ETF is launched, we're going to have 1 million Bitcoin sitting at the ETFs on behalf of the clients from these institutions. People would think you'd be crazy, right? And the floodgates are open. That has been happening. It's by far the most successful launch of an ETF that we've ever seen. Just like if any new technology, right? In the beginning, we're all worried about it, but eventually, when you look at it and you really understand the value that it has, not only in an asset allocation perspective, as I said, but on a fundamental level, what this really represents as a savings technology to the world, then people really buy into the idea. And I'm starting to see a lot of that coming from institutions as well. They're looking. Before, they looked at Bitcoin as a trade, right? They looked at the price like, oh, here's where the price is. I'm going to buy it, just as a trade. Now they're looking more into, okay, so where do I put this in my portfolio? Does it fit within real estate, long-term assets, hard assets, in gold, right? Which clearly, I think, signals a shift in perspective of where Bitcoin is in the cycle, and I think on the adoption scale. So I think the future is very promising to what we're seeing, given the adoption that we're seeing.
In the past month, ETH ETFs, have seen some developments, and that brought us to a bigger story about, the political tides shifting for crypto in Washington. We hear so much about how Bitcoin or crypto broadly has become, a growing matter of interest, regarding the US presidential elections. I am not always sure. Some days I think I need a reality check on, just how key of an issue that may be for these elections. But I do want to ask you about the reverse. Being that the main catalysts for Bitcoin are behind us now, do you see the election as the next big catalyst for Bitcoin?
Potentially, yes, right? So as you said, let's step back again and let's think. If I told you a year ago that we would have presidential candidates talking about Bitcoin would be actually in the center of politics, no one would believe, right? So that just shows when we think that adoption is not quick enough, that we want to see more people adopting it. Just think about these things. I think adoption is going just as expected with anything that it's new. And actually, I would say that it's above expectation in many cases. But to your point, I think that, seeing the things that we've seen, even the Ethereum ETF being approved, having Trump comment about Bitcoin, it answers, and I think it puts to rest the number one question that I used to have from institutions, which is, you go through Bitcoin, you explain everything to them, they may understand the fundamentals, they may understand everything. And at the end, I can't tell you how many times people will tell me, yeah, if everything you're telling me is right, and if I really understand how Bitcoin works, governments are never going to allow it, right? This is going to be banned at some point. And I think this is showing us that not only governments are not going to allow it, but they're going to have to embrace it, right? Because if they don't embrace it, they're going to have a bigger problem, right?
And so going back to the election as a catalyst, how big of a catalyst do you see that being, and how do you expect to see that play out? Like is there a big run up to November? Is this something that we see kind of move on the news later at the end of the year?
Yeah, I'm much more excited about Bitcoin again as a technology. Like if we look at this year, the halving excites me much more than politics, right? And elections. I do think that a lot of people listen to elections, and I think depending how this goes and how it's already happening, right? It may be a catalyst, and we will see more people getting interested. Particularly, people come from Bitcoin is this weird asset where it has so many different characteristics that people approach it, from different angles. So for example, somebody like me who's an economist will approach it from the economic side, right? So I'll look at scarcity, I'll look at price, I'll look at those things. If you're in the tech side, you're going to approach it through the technology angle. You're going to look at, okay, so I want to see, what the protocol is. I want to see, how exactly the issuance of coins that happens, the halving, all of those things, right? And that's true, I think, across different disciplines, including politics. And I think a lot of people are going to approach Bitcoin from the political side as well, and they're going to see it what it ultimately is, which is also it's freedom money, right? It's money that you can use without anybody having to tell you, if you're allowed or not allowed to use it.
Okay, that's all for Crypto World today. We'll be back again tomorrow, and we'll see you then.